Hi everyone, I'm Chris McGarvey, one of the pastors at Bethel Baptist Church, and just doing this from the house tonight. So tough questions here is the theme. We often plow through our days without giving much thought to ultimate existential questions, but they're always there, aren't they? They're kind of smoldering beneath the surface, and oftentimes it's a crisis, whether a personal one, loss of a loved one, or a serious health diagnosis that causes those things to bubble up to the surface. So in the midst of this pandemic, we thought it would be helpful, it could be helpful to do a series on some of the tough faith-related questions that commonly trouble us and are frequently asked. So we're seeking to address some of these questions, just hit them head on, in order to strengthen the faith of our Bethel Church family, and also to offer some honest, serious reflections to anybody interested in wrestling with these questions. So if you're a visitor joining with us, we're glad that you're here, and we hope that these can be helpful for you. So my responses are obviously not going to be exhaustive. These are huge questions. Books have been written on them. But what I hope to do is kind of give a thumbnail sketch response, some helpful food for thought from a Christian perspective, and I'll also point out some additional resources if you want to study these things a little further, look into them further. If you missed the first session last week, last Wednesday, we discussed the question, why does God allow so much suffering? And it should be there on the Facebook page, so you can watch it later if you're interested. Also, again, a little quick word on format. I mentioned this last week. I'll take about 20 minutes or so to address the question of tonight. And then with the remaining, say, 7 to 10 minutes, I'll try to respond to a few live questions. So we learned a few things from last week. One, there's a lag. I don't know if it'll be the same lag. It was almost 3 minutes last week. So feel free to submit questions at any point so that they're not coming in, after we've finished. And also, if you don't have a Facebook account, you're obviously able to watch this right now, but you're not able to submit a question through Facebook. So if you're in that boat, you can submit a question. We set up an email that you can email toughquestions@bbcde, boyboycatdogelephant.org. And Pastor Tyler is manning that, and he'll pass them along to me via text. So we're going to give priority to questions that pertain to the question of the night, but if you have questions that you'd like to suggest for to be addressed in the future, you can send those along too. Right? So let me just recommend 2 books here. I'm going to quote from both of them tonight. One is called The Reason for God. I mentioned it last week, by Tim Keller, Belief in an Age of Skepticism. That's a really excellent book. And then secondly, this book by McLaughlin, which is a newer book. It's just out in the last year or so. It's called 12 Hard Questions for the World's Largest Religion. And I'm just finding her to be really clear and readable and insightful, thoughtful. She also has some great content online as well, so you can look her up. It's called Confronting Christianity by McLaughlin. Okay, so tonight's question, isn't it intolerant to claim that there is only one way to heaven? So certainly that is the Christian claim. So Jesus, just to give a couple samples of where this idea comes from, Jesus himself in the Gospel of John, chapter 14, says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And then the Apostle Peter, as the church is just being birthed after Jesus rises from the dead and Pentecost happens, which is the sending of the Holy Spirit, Peter is preaching early on, kind of in public, sharing these things about Jesus. And he says this, there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven by which we must be saved. So at a foundational level, it's worth noting that it's ultimately not a Christian claim, or a Christian's claim, like yours or the person that you know who's a Christian. It's actually Jesus's claim. But still, we need to press in a little bit on this issue of tolerance and think through it a little bit. So First off, I want to start with a little illustration that is fairly well known. So thanks to my oldest daughter, this is a picture of an elephant. If I had drawn it, it might have been indistinguishable from a cow or a rhinoceros or something. So you've heard this story of the 5 blind men that, or however many blind men there are, that come in and they're supposed to learn about an elephant and what it's like. And so one of those men comes in and he touches the trunk and feels the trunk and it wriggles in his hands and he says, "Oh, an elephant is like a big snake." And then another man comes and he ends up over here by the leg and he feels the leg, this huge, strong leg of the elephant. And he says, "Oh, an elephant is like the trunk of a tree." And then another man comes and he stands here and pushes on the side of the elephant and he says, "Oh, an elephant is like a wall, this immovable mass." And then another, touches the tail and, it's like a rope, and, another touches the tusk and it's like a spear. And so the whole point of that illustration is, isn't this what religion, like religious truth, is like? All these different religions, it seems contradictory, but really it's all kind of the same thing. It's just a matter of perspective, right? So I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but pretty common idea, to address the fact that there are lots of different religions in the world, and are they all kind of saying the same thing, and so forth. So there's actually a number of problems with that illustration. Not least is the fact that the person usually playing that card usually is kind of unknowingly assuming the role of the all-seeing narrator. Okay, so he or she alone is able to see clearly, to observe and to judge the blindness of the men and the limited perspective from their experience with the elephant. But aren't we all blind to a degree, or seeing only part of the picture? I mean, isn't it presumptuous and arrogant to claim the bird's eye view? So Tim Keller, in that book, Reason for God, puts it this way. He says, "How could you possibly know that no religion can see the whole truth unless you yourself have this superior, comprehensive knowledge of spiritual reality you just claimed that none of the religions have?" So that's the first problem. It also is patronizing, frankly, to sincere religious adherents, believers, okay? So it actually doesn't take their beliefs and their convictions seriously. So give you an idea of what I mean by that. So some years ago, there was a family member who, we were having this religious discussion, talking about Jesus, talking about the Bible, talking about the gospel, the good news about Jesus. And essentially, what he did was he kind of patted me on the head and said, "You know what, just, live a little bit longer and you'll see that all religions are basically different paths, up the mountain, all leading to the same summit." Okay, so that's a pretty common sentiment, again, in our culture, an illustration that I'm sure you've heard before as well. But, Buddhism does not believe in a personal God, and yet that is central to the Christian faith. Or in Hinduism, there are millions of gods. They do believe in a supreme being, Brahman, but there are millions of sub-gods, and they're categories, cascading categories. But Islam, Judaism, Christianity, they're all monotheistic religions. So we've got to take that seriously. These are mutually exclusive claims. They can't both be true at the same time. And also it's worth noting that spiritual people who claim that, doctrine or faith claims don't matter, like, come on, don't we all just believe the same thing? Why do we have to make such a big deal out of doctrine that divides us? They are actually making a faith claim by saying that. They believe in a God or gods that don't think truth ultimately matters at the end of the day. They're believing in God or gods for whom contradiction is apparently not a problem. So again, that's worth noting. But if you end up getting a devoted Muslim and a devoted Jew and a devoted Christian into a room, and obviously we could multiply participants, but this will do to make the point, and we ask them a few questions, here's the kind of thing we're going to find. If we say, did Jesus rise from the dead? And the Muslim is going to say, he respects Jesus as a prophet, but he's going to say, no, he didn't die. He actually was taken up to heaven before he died. For the Jew, did Jesus, rise from the dead? No, that Jew believes that Jesus of Nazareth was an imposter Messiah. But the Christian is going to wholeheartedly respond in the affirmative that Jesus rose from the dead. His whole faith is built on that reality. So whoever says that these are just different paths up the same mountain, leading to the same summit, they haven't taken the beliefs of these individual, faiths, religions seriously. And we need to do that. So the claim of Jesus Christ to be the true and living way could be viewed certainly as intolerant, arrogant, elitist, ignorant even. Certainly, it could be. Unless it's true. So Rebecca McLaughlin, in this book again, Confronting Christianity, she tells a story of a university science professor who is Iranian. And this man came to faith in Jesus through his musical teacher, musical mentor, and Bach. So in 1980, when the Islamic Revolution swept through Iran, classical music was actually banned. Okay, so some folks who loved classical music, they arranged these little private concerts in homes, and this man was an excellent flautist, and he was practicing this Bach piece, sonata, for one of the concerts, and his teacher said, "I can't hear the cross of Christ in what you're playing." And this man was a Muslim, and he's perplexed, and it caused him to study the Bible, and he came to faith in Jesus through studying the Bible. But then he became perplexed about a new question. Isn't it wrong to try to persuade others of your faith? So he actually came and asked Rebecca McLaughlin this question, because I think they met at a conference where she was speaking. And so she knew that he was actually an expert in breast cancer diagnostics. Again, he's a professor of science. And so McLaughlin asked him what he would say if there was a middle-aged woman who, because of her history and other issues, she was high risk for breast cancer. If she said to him, "I feel fine. I don't see the need to get a mammogram. I've never had one. I don't need one. I feel fine." What would he say? And not only what would he say, which is kind of obvious, what is the most loving thing to say? To do? Like, would you seek to persuade this woman? So the issue is not really, is it intolerant to claim that there's only one way to heaven? The issue is, are the claims of Jesus Christ true? Because if so, then persuasion is actually a form of love. Now, as soon as I use the word persuasion, let me just quickly qualify that. When I say persuasion, I do not mean coercion. I do not mean manipulation. Sadly, there's plenty of this that goes on, just kind of playing on emotional heartstrings and just being slippery. That's not at all what I mean. I mean taking serious matters. We are all going to die. We all have these ultimate questions to face and seek to answer. And if there are answers, if God has spoken, if God even came in the flesh and lived for us and taught us and died for us, then sharing those things passionately with those you love and care about, because they matter, because the issues matter and the people matter, if they're true, it's unloving not to seek to persuade. Right? So the real issue is, are the claims of Jesus Christ true? You could also put it this way: we're in the midst of Holy Week, right? So this is most wonderful part of the year, usually for Christians, difficult in the midst of a pandemic, but Easter is very relevant in the face of a pandemic. So Holy Week culminates on Resurrection Sunday. Christians believe the Bible's claim that Jesus, the Christ, the Messiah, was the incarnate Son of God, that he really lived. Even secular historians don't dispute that claim, that he really died. Again, not much dispute here from historians, but that he also really rose from the dead on the third day, on Sunday morning. So if Christianity is just ethics, like if it's just a list of moral commands and prohibitions, do this, don't do that, and if you don't like some of them, like the Bible's sexual ethics or forgiveness ethics, then you can just say, you know what, you do you. Just don't be pushing your truth, your morality on me. You've got your truth, I've got mine, right? But Christianity is not just a list of do's and don'ts. It's not first and foremost an ethical code. If Jesus really rose from the dead, and if he really is who he claimed to be, then we've got way bigger issues to face than whether or not we like the sexual ethics or the forgiveness ethics of the Bible. If he really was God in the flesh, if it's all true, then it's not just an issue of you do you and I'll do me, choose your truth. Choose your master, yes, like every human being is going to do that. We're all going to serve somebody. If you don't believe me, you can listen to Bob Dylan on that one. You got to serve somebody. It's a song by Bob Dylan. You could look it up. But the truth is the truth, regardless of whether you like it or even whether you believe it. So the resurrection either happened or it didn't, regardless of how we feel about it. A person's opinion about it doesn't actually change that. So C.S. Lewis said it memorably like this. He said, Christ says that he is humble and meek, and we believe him, not noticing that if he were merely a man, humility and meekness are the very last characteristics we could attribute to some of his sayings. I am trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claims to be God. That is the one thing we must not say. A man who is merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic, on a level with a man who says he's a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. So, someone can believe that the earth is flat, or that the sun revolves around the earth, or they can deny the Holocaust. But their belief, no matter how sincere it may be, does not change the shape of this globe, the heliocentricity of our solar system, or the deaths of 6 million Jews. So the issue of whether or not an exclusive claim is true is more fundamental than whether or not a belief is intolerant. Okay, let's just, before we take some questions here, let's just drill in just a little bit further on this subject of tolerance. Do you realize that no one actually believes that all intolerance is bad? I guess you could also say it this way, to put it provocatively: everyone is a bigot. Okay, so one definition of bigotry is someone who is intolerant of those who have different opinions. Okay, so do you think, here's what I mean by that, do you think you should be tolerant, that we should be tolerant as a society of the KKK? How about Holocaust deniers? So, again, all of us have to determine, are certain things are just out of bounds. Everybody is intolerant of certain things. So let's not think that we're in this position of perfect tolerance, because everyone has to make those decisions. But finally, Firm belief in exclusive truth claims does not need to lead to an arrogant, condescending intolerance. Okay? So this is something that Christians need to hear. This is something that everybody in our culture needs to hear, because there's so much just anger and vitriol sometimes in debate and discussion. So we should be able to debate these things, vigorously and honestly and openly, without hurting each other's feelings, without attacking each other. But something that's happened, interestingly, in our culture in the last, say, 10 to 15 years is that the meaning of tolerance is actually kind of shifted on us. So tolerance now means something like all viewpoints are equally valid. So that's kind of like a sleight of hand change in the definition that ends up making intolerance an incoherent concept. So I have to be able to disagree with you, to challenge the validity of your viewpoint, and you with me, in order for us to actually have the opportunity to tolerate each other. I've got to be able to disagree with you in order to tolerate you and you me. So if all views are equally valid, if I've got to accept the validity of everyone else's belief, I don't need to tolerate them. I need to agree with them. I need to accept that as equally valid. So firm religious belief conviction does not equate to bigotry. It doesn't need to be, it should never be, looking on others with arrogant contempt. So one more quote here from Rebecca McLaughlin. She writes, in a New York Times op-ed entitled The Dangers of Echo Chambers on Campus, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Nicholas Kristof confessed, "We liberals champion tolerance, except for conservatives and evangelical Christians. We want to be inclusive of people who don't look like us, so long as they think like us." So appreciate that honesty. And I say that also applies to Christians. It needs to, or any religious believer. If you are a Christian, I'll just speak to the Christians, you need to take note that this is a danger for all of us. Christians, by our very beliefs, ought to be the most humble, gracious, loving people, even when we disagree with folks. So Christians believe that every person is made in the image of God with this inestimable value and dignity and worth. And so we should treat people with that kind of dignity and value and respect. So it flows from our beliefs. So we can disagree with other people. We can seek to persuade our friends and family of the truth of Christianity. But when other people believe differently than we do, we must treat them with respect and love. If we follow Jesus, we are called to love all of our neighbors and even our enemies. All right, so let's see if we can take some questions here for the last 7-8 minutes. So here's one question. How would you address the concern that truth claims are power plays? So that's certainly a great question, and plenty of beliefs, plenty of faith claims, truth claims have been used in a way to throw weight around, to leverage power for the good of the group, the good of the tribe. So this has sadly happened. It's been done by Christians. It's been done by atheists. It's been done probably by all kinds of people, right? So the fact that it has happened doesn't mean that that's the best representation of whatever religious group is actually using it that way. So I guess I'll just speak to Christians here. If Christians use truth claims as power plays, that is actually flying in the face of true Christian values, because Jesus used his power not for his own sake, but for the sake of others. So Christians actually follow Jesus on that self-giving. He's given his life for us. So he's taking care of our deepest needs. Now we can give our lives for the good of others. So we don't use truth claims or even any kind of clout or power authority for our own sake. We should use it in the service of others, the well-being, the best interest of others and of society. So Christians should actually be the best of citizens. Other questions? Are there any that came up on the Facebook Live? No? Okay. Just trying to see if there's any other questions that have come up here. Okay. Looks like we don't have tons of questions. So I thought this was another interesting little illustration here, and it's always encouraging. I think I appreciate when people of any faith they reflect some self-knowledge and some understanding and humility and honesty, because I think if more of us had that in our public discourse, even if we have different convictions, different beliefs, we might actually get somewhere, rather than just kind of lobbing grenades at one another. So this is in Reason for God. So Keller writes this. He talks about Mark Lilla, a professor at the University of Chicago. He spoke to a bright young student at Wharton Business School, who, to Lilla's bafflement, had gone forward at a Billy Graham crusade to give his life to Christ. Lilla writes, "I wanted to cast doubt on the step he was about to take, to help him see there are other ways to live, other ways to seek knowledge, love, even self-transformation. I wanted to convince him his dignity depended on maintaining a free, skeptical attitude towards doctrine. I wanted to save him. Doubt, like faith, has to be learned. It is a skill. But the curious thing about skepticism is that its adherents, ancient and modern, have so often been proselytizers. In reading them, I've often wanted to ask, why do you care? Their skepticism offers no good answer to that question, and I don't have one for myself." So basically he's saying, wow, here I'm reacting to someone who wants to convert to Christianity because I want them to be cool and detached and, think that there's this better way to live. And what am I actually doing but seeking to make a convert? So actually, we are inveterate. It's kind of an inescapable thing. We're all going to be missionaries, evangelists for what we really believe is the truth. All right, so actually, I guess we do have a minute and a half left here. And there was one other question. Did Jesus actually make exclusive truth claims? So I would say absolutely yes. I can just give you a handful here. So I mentioned John 14:6 already. That is really clear. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus also said crazy things like to Martha, the story of Lazarus when Jesus raised him from the dead. Before he raised him from the dead, he speaks to Lazarus' sister, Martha, and he says, I am the resurrection. This is a human being. This is a man in front of this woman. Just imagine this. Crazy, crazy claims. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. And then he says to her, do you believe this? Or you have the last thing that he said to the disciples before he ascended back to the Father after the resurrection, the Great Commission, Matthew 28. He says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. That's just audacious. Like, this is why C.S. Lewis said this guy's crazy. He's a madman. He's a megalomaniac, unless he's actually the Son of God. Unless he's really Emmanuel, God with us. all authority has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations. Disciples. Like they should be following me. Baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you. And surely I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So, crazy, crazy truth claims. Jesus also claimed to forgive sins. And the Jewish leaders were like, how can he do that? Only God can forgive sins. Well, that's the point. He didn't say, oh, no, I didn't mean it in that sense. I mean, I'm just kind of like in a mediatorial role. No, like a priest or, no, he didn't push back on that at all because he really was God in the flesh. So yes, he made lots of exclusive claims. I'd encourage whoever asked that question to check out the Gospel of John and read through it, looking for those kind of claims, and you'll see quite a few. All right. So I think our time is up. Thanks for joining us. God bless you. Good night.